Hi, my name is Donna Thigpen, and I've been a member of the gathering here for almost 15 years now. So I'm really an old-timer in a lot of ways, in terms of how long I've been here and how many years I've been on earth. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I had a very chaotic childhood. My parents were both 18 years old when I was born. And of course we didn't know that at the time because I was a child, but both of my parents were alcoholics. I have two brothers that are younger than I am, and we grew up in a house where there was fighting and fussing and drinking and just a chaotic childhood. And my parents divorced when I was not quite 12 years old. And that turned out to be an event that was, God set me on the road where I am now. I had an aunt and uncle, Aunt Bertha and Uncle Stephen. She was my father's sister. He was a Free-Will Baptist minister, and the three of us were farmed out to family members, and I went to live with my Aunt Bertha and Uncle Stephen, and they adopted me. And I went from wondering, what's for supper tonight? Will there be supper tonight? To a middle-class home where everything I needed was there, and most of what I wanted was there. Both of my parents, I think of the waste of their lives because neither of them knew God. And that's been a very sad thing in my life. Both of them died at age 56. So that prepared me in some ways that I never thought about being preparation for working for God. But it gave me an understanding of that kind of lifestyle and how hard that is on children and on young people. My brother stayed with my mother and my grandmother, and my other brother stayed with another aunt, my mother's sister. So we had a loving extended family. So, it wasn't a sad childhood in the way that you might think about. But I really was introduced to Christianity in terms of people living it out when I went to live with my aunt and uncle. And I had stayed with them a lot when I was little. They'd never had any children, and so they doted on me from the time I was born. I'd spend 4 or 5 weeks in the summer with them, that kind of stuff. I was 13 when I accepted Christ. And like most teenagers, I had a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning, and then you get busy. You get busy with being a teenager. You get busy with dating. And God had a hand in that too. My husband Sloan and I started dating when we were 15 and 16. So, people say, well, how did you meet your husband? Well, I never met him. We played in the sandbox. And we used to joke that we were the only 2 kids in town that had to go to church on Sunday night. So we started dating the year I was a senior in high school. And, you hear people say, well, I married my best friend. I did. And we've been married now. We got married in 1963. So what does that make this? 50 some, 50 some years. And it's been a good marriage, but it's also I'm telling you, when people say they've been married for a long time and we never had a fight, I say, well, then that means one of you is a complete doormat. We had our ups and downs, and we were blessed with 2 wonderful children, and they've given us 5 grandchildren, which. I'm not the least bit prejudiced, but they're beautiful and smart and loving, and so we're blessed in that regard. When I think about life and where I've been, I always knew from the time I was about 5 or 6 that I wanted to be a nurse. And so out of high school, I went to East Carolina and got a bachelor's in nursing degree. Back in the day when most nurses went to 3-year diploma schools, which was what I wanted to do, but my uncle, my father, had helped to start Mount Olive University, and so that's where he wanted me to go. And the president of Mount Olive was a good friend of his, Dr. Burkett Raper, and he had Burkett come to dinner one night to talk me into going to Mount Olive. But when it was all said and done, Burkett had told them that I needed to go where they had a nursing program, because I would waste my time with going to Mount Olive for 4 years, because they didn't have that program. And so I wound up at East Carolina in the very first class of nurses that graduated from there in 1964. So I helped start the Nursing Pirates. And then Sloan and I wanted children desperately. And we just weren't having any success at all. So I decided to go back to graduate school. We moved to Baltimore, Maryland for a year, and I got a master's in nursing from University of Maryland. We were there in a very turbulent time. It was when the riots happened. Martin Luther King was killed, and so it was a very scary time to be in Baltimore. But the wonderful news was that I got pregnant while we were there. And at this point in time, Sloan and I were not really involved in church. We'd been brought up in church, and we would go sporadically, but we weren't involved, and we weren't really consulting God very much in terms of what to do in our daily life. We were busy with graduate school, busy trying to have a baby, busy with trying to start a life, and so I got pregnant while I was in graduate school, and I had a miscarriage. And that's the kind of thing that will just either turn you towards God or turn you away from God. It turned me away even more. It's like, I'd be a good mother, I know I would. And I've seen in my nursing career already, I had worked in public health nursing, and I had seen children in abject poverty. And I thought, why, God, would you not give us a baby? I got focused more and more on a career. I started teaching nursing. And then God said, okay, the time's right now. It's my time and not your time. And we had a son. And again, he was born without a rectal opening. There was a dimple there. And so this sweet little baby had to have surgery many times before he was age 2. Now the happy end of that story is that he's perfectly healthy, has 2 wonderful children, and there are no signs of his early problems. But that was and again, I'm angry at God. Why would you do this? I did everything right. And I think the funny part of this is, when you've had a child that has congenital anomalies, you don't have the courage to have another baby. Well, God really played a joke on us, because I got up one morning and I'm throwing up, and I thought, oh, I have the flu. This went on for a while, and Stephen was in the hospital, and one of the women there that I knew, she said, oh, I know what's wrong with you, you're pregnant. And I said, and you're crazy. But this was back in the day when they had to kill the rabbit and take the specimen in, and so I did that. I had a friend in the lab, because I was working at Medical College of Virginia, and she called me back and said, congratulations. Talk about denial. I said, well, I took that specimen in. Their aspirins used to come in little glass bottles. And I said, I took it in an aspirin bottle. Do you think it's a false positive? She said, no, no, no. Well, Sloan came home that day. First time, with the first baby, he goes with me to the doctor's office, and there's flowers, and there's dinner, and all this kind of stuff. Well, he comes home from work that day, and I said, well, do you want to know? He said, know what? I said, said, well, don't you want to know about the test? He said, well, I know. It was. I said, you're going to be a daddy again. So we've always joked about the fact that our daughter Kendra was 2 years premature. And again, we were busy with life. We moved back at that point to North Carolina because our parents were pressuring us to bring the grandchildren home, and through a fluke, a woman who had been my advisor at East Carolina was starting a nursing program at James Brunt Community College. And she ran into my uncle, and he told her where I was, and so she called the next day, and long story short, they recruited us on and I both to come work at James Brunt. And the family was delighted about that. So we came home to raise our children. And we did what parents do. We took them to Sunday school, we took them to church. And I was involved with the church. I mean, I did things like help with the children's pageant, stayed in the nursery, taught, the little kids, and kind of did what my kids did as they grew up in the church. And we prayed, and we were, thought we were where we should be. But still, God was not an intimate friend. He was more like an acquaintance, We were grateful for our children. We were grateful for our job, and in our family, things were going well. And I started back I got very, very focused on my career and moving up. I became head of the nursing program at James Brunt, and then I moved up in administration, became a dean, started going to back to school. My kids were in grade school and junior high, and also was doing consulting work. So I was busy. I was busy with everything but God's work. I think there comes a time in life when God gets your attention. And a lot of traumatic things happened in a short period of time. There were 3 women that were extremely important in my life at that point in time. Well, actually there were 4. My mother-in-law, I certainly would put in that category because she was a wonderful Christian lady. My aunt that adopted me was one of the most wonderful people that I've ever known, and in terms of God's work, I used to say she was a wonderful pastor and an incredible role model. She really lived the scripture in Titus 2 that talks about the role of women in the church. And I could not have asked for a more wonderful role model. There was my grandmother, my mother's mother, who raised 3 daughters. Her husband was killed back in the Depression, and she raised 3 daughters and most of her grandchildren, and was another wonderful influence. And then there was my biological mother that I loved, but by this point in time my mother was heavy into the bottle. She was in rehab several times. My mother died when I was in my early 30s. She died at age 56. And within a period of 18 months, all 3 of these women who were important in my life passed away. My mother, my grandmother, and then my aunt. My aunt had cancer, and it was ugly. This was back in the 70s when chemotherapy was not what it is today. Chemotherapy was worse in many ways than the disease. And I got really angry with God over that. It's like, how can you let somebody with the testimony that she had suffer that way? It took me a long time to realize that God was using that. Many people came to see her and were impressed by her faith and how she was handling this. So I had those 3 traumatic events. I had 2 children in junior high. I was busy. I was going back to graduate school. I was working a full-time job at the college, and I was doing consulting on the side. I was busy. That was not so good for my children, and it was not so good for my marriage. My sweet husband told me at one point in time that he felt like the refrigerator. He was a convenience. And so we were going through a really bad time. And so I wound up in a really deep depression. The kind of depression that says, I can't get up in the morning and go. And everybody would just be better off without me. So I proceeded to swallow a bottle of pills. And God said, nope, I have things for you to do. So it was a sequence of events where the children were at school and Sloan was at work and I was home alone. And it's a miracle how God works. My family doctor gave me a phone call. This was in the middle of the afternoon. And my speech was extremely blurred. I answered the phone, but I was really, man, I was out of it. I was gone. And she sent one of my closest friends to check on me because she knew something was wrong, and she knew I'd been struggling with depression. So I wound up in the hospital for a month. And that's when I began to think about why I was in this. I stopped. You know, God stopped me and said, sit down and take a look at your life. Take a look at the example you're setting for your children. Take a look at your relationship with your husband. And take a look at what is really important. And so that's when I started my journey back to Christ. And that's when, over a period of time, our marriage began to heal. And I began to realize what a really wonderful husband I have. And, you know, through all of this, you know, he took care of our kids, and he took care of me. We went to counseling. We went back to church. And so there was a healing process that went on. And it didn't happen in a week. It didn't happen in a day. It was several years. I had gone back to graduate school, and only took me a brief period of time to get a doctorate. It only took me 8.5 years, going one night a week from Kenansville, Beulahville, North Carolina, to Raleigh, which is about a 100-mile trip. And so I made that journey with a friend of mine every Monday night for right at 8 years. And I had changed my goal at that point in time. I had been head of the nursing program, and then I'd been a dean, and my goal became to be a community college president. And so once I had finished the doctorate, and my children by this time were out of high school and out of college. Well, my son was out of college, and my daughter was married and was having her own set of problems. But I told the person I was working with, a headhunter, I said, I would like to be a college president east of the Mississippi, south of the Mason-Dixon, and preferably no more than an hour from the ocean. So where did God send me? Bismarck, North Dakota. That's about as far, folks, from an ocean as you can get. But it was a wonderful experience for Sloan and I was able to begin to participate in things like prayer breakfast and to bring that part of my life more and more into my work situation. And we stayed there for 11 years. and came back to retire at Topsail Beach. And our goal, our plan was that we would go to the nearest Baptist church. That was something that Sloan and I talked about early in our marriage, that we would go to whichever church was nearest in terms of Baptist. My uncle was a Free Will Baptist minister, so and his grandfather was a Baptist minister. So if we lived closer to a Baptist church, we'd go there. If we lived closer to a Free Will Baptist church, we would go there. Well, I don't know how Sloan pulled it off, but we never lived closer to a Free Will church. We always lived closer to the Baptist church. So when we came here, we joined Surf City Baptist Church with the idea that we were retired and we would come to church on Sunday mornings and prayer meeting and Bible studies and that kind of thing. But neither of us had any plans for being a leader in the church. And God just kept laying things on my heart. And I think the Bible verses that have kind of shaped me for where I am right now is Titus 2, 3, and 4, which talks about the role of women in the church and how women are to be mentors to younger women. And so the first part of the ministry here that I've been involved with is mentoring young women. And again, it's amazing to me how God works. I think the first, we've been members here for maybe 6 or 8 months. And I started a group for young women called the Yahweh Sisterhood. And it was a group of older women and a group of younger women. And God started putting younger women into my life. I remember one story, and I was coming here for a meeting, and there was a little red sports car that was right on my bumper behind me. And I thought, whoever's in that car is mad at me because I pulled out on the highway in front of them. And we both pulled into the parking lot of the church. And I thought, oh my goodness, road rage, road rage. Well, we both sat in the car for a moment, and I realized there was a young woman in the car, and I thought, well, she won't beat me up. So I get out of the car, and she sees that I'm too old to beat her up. So we start talking, and we both were coming to the church to the same meeting, and she thought that I was angry with her because she was riding my bumper because she was late. And that began the relationship with the first young woman that God put in my life. And it turned out she was a battered wife. But I got to know her and to work with her some. And God has, over these past 12 years, put a young couple in our life, one after the other. Some of them through the Yahweh Sisterhood, and some of them through other young people in the church. And we have become very close to these young women and their husbands, or if they're single, with the young women. And I can tell you what a blessing that has been to us. One couple in particular, Emily and Judah McGabb. He's an Osprey pilot, and now he's a big-time major in the Marine Corps. I met Emily through the Yahweh Sisterhood, and they have become like grandchildren to us, and their children like great-grandchildren. And so that relationship now, they've been in our lives for like 7 years, because their first child was just born and we babysat, and the second child was just born, and then the Marine Corps sent them off to Quantico. And I have to tell this funny little story about this baby is like my great-grandchild, and he's 4 now. And he informed his mother last week that he wasn't ready to go to heaven yet because he wanted to go back and see Miss Donna. Now, if that is not a blessing from God, and so they're coming to spend a vacation week with us pretty soon. There's a couple now in Hawaii that I hear from. She's finished her degree in Christian education. This was a family on the verge of divorce. And so God can use you in ways that you didn't anticipate. And then our church started a group called Sea Salt. That's, I have to stop and think about the C. It's Christian Seniors Living Triumphantly, which spells out sea salt. God just laid it on my heart that, that would be an extension in a way of what I had been doing with mentoring young women. That I thought that from what I was feeling in my heart, I had the skills to work with the seniors in our church, as well as the other end of the spectrum where I was working with mothers and young children. So I've been doing that now for almost 2 years, and it has been a delightful ministry. We have on average 12 to 15 people who come. We have fellowship, we play games, we take trips. Last year we took a group of 30, I believe there were 36 of us, went to visit the Ark in Kentucky. And talk about how you make connections in your life. Out of the group of 33 that went on that trip, 11 were nurses. So we were able to take care of anybody in that group that got sick in any way. We had a psychiatric nurse, we had an orthopedic nurse, we had an OB/GYN nurse. And it's just funny how God puts together groups of folks. And we've been meeting monthly for fun and fellowship and lunch. And we've been taking day trips, and before this coronavirus shut us down, we were ready to go to a senior retreat at Fort Castle. And this has been a tremendous blessing to me. Because it's easy when you get to this age to sit down in front of the TV. Although there was one vow I made that I have not broken. I said, when I retire, I will not watch soap operas. Not that there's anything wrong with soap operas, I just was not going to get hooked. And this gave me a place to use my abilities and has forged wonderful friendships, and I hope has had a positive impact with the people that I'm working with. And so God uses the difficult things in our life. The depression gave me a sensitivity, because a lot of people as they get older, depression is a real issue. You've been married for 40 or 50 years and suddenly you're a widow or a widower. Or your money is tight. And with the other end of the spectrum with the children, what a joy that has been for us, because thank you, Lord, that none of my grandchildren have children yet, to put great-grandchildren in our lives. And so Sloan and I have been very blessed. We've been blessed to be able to be a part of the leadership team in the church. Sloan was ordained as a deacon a year or so after we came here. So God has given us a wonderful life in our golden years. Although I'm not sure that's exactly the right term for old age. You got to be pretty tough to be old. Because anybody who says, oh, it's going to be wonderful, and well, let's see, then first there's the knees, and then there's the shoulders, and then you can't breathe. But God takes care of us. He takes care of us, and He puts things in our life to cheer us up and to bring us out of those kinds of situations. Right now I'm looking forward to this couple I was just telling you about. They're coming to spend 5 days with me in a week or so. So that Asher's going to get to come to Miss Donna's before he goes to heaven. Anybody who's watching this testimony, if you'd like to talk to me, no matter which end of the spectrum you're on, I would welcome that. With the younger women, we have what we call porch talks. They come and we sit on the porch, or as in Emily's case, she sits on her porch in Virginia, and I sit on my porch here, and we talk on the phone. And so if you have something in your life and there's some place that you would like to talk about it, but you don't want to go to counseling, if you want to talk to a friend, give me a call. I would love to have you as my friend.